In 2017, Myanmar underwent a bout of heavy violence and displacement in its Rakhine state, primarily against a minority Muslim group in the country known as the Rohingya. The situation in the country started swiftly and led to burned down villages, brutal killings, and mass displacements of the Rohingya. The UN has since classified the situation as a genocide. Amnesty International, a human rights group, released a report detailing how one place helped create an information environment that would spark this genocide against the Rohingya. Facebook. Facebook's algorithm helped facilitate the spread of misinformation, a kind of false and misleading information, to people in Myanmar, often using Islamophobic conspiracy theories and bigoted stories about the Rohingya being invaders to the country. And the more posts someone would like, the more they would see similar kinds of posts appear in their feed, leading to the creation of an echo chamber, a feedback loop of self-affirming lies that solidify themselves on that person's feed. This is just one way misinformation can cause severe, real-world damage. From AI images to insane conspiracies, misinformation is a new superbug in our modern-day culture. According to a report by Imperva, 2024 saw almost half the entire internet populated solely by bots, or fake accounts. These bots are used for a variety of purposes, some completely harmless, like advertisement, while others are far more nefarious. As I'm sure you're aware, the US just had an election, and even from the start, misinformation began to run rampant this past cycle. Closer looks into the origins of some of these election lies found ties not just to extremists and conspiracy theorists, but to foreign governments, most often China and Russia. The Associated Press found that Russia in particular created multiple bomb threat hoaxes in states like Georgia and spread bigoted lies regarding Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz ahead of the election. One of the ways they did this isn't just by creating fake accounts posing as real people, but using AI bots to repeatedly flood social media sites with false information about the election and the war in Ukraine. On the flip side, China was no innocent party either, and would often spread fake stories while posing as US veterans or citizens online. This kind of intentional spread of misinformation, as opposed to its organic spread, is known as disinformation. It's a pretty common tool used by national governments and hacking groups to interfere with the operations of a country or group that they target. They go into a community, pose as one of its members, and post seemingly credible sources that spread a false piece of information or news to that group. China does this in many elections that they have a special interest in. Before Taiwan's elections in early 2024, there was a flurry of claims regarding voter fraud, largely stemming from one faked video of someone incorrectly counting the wrong candidate on a ballot. Now, Taiwan was thankfully swift in its response, utilizing fact-checking groups and other tools as soon as possible to knock down these claims before they could become an issue for the election as a whole. But not every nation is so lucky. Russia and China throw their weight in the misinformation camp often, but the US is just as guilty of it. Donald Trump, in the wake of his election defeat in 2020, spread very similar voter fraud claims that became known as the Big Lie. In response to this, on January 6, 2021, after a speech, his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol building, overwhelming police and eventually gaining entry into the halls of Congress. 3 people died. Now, it may be tempting to view this misinformation as always being sourced from big, scary government agencies and intentionally spread, but the darker truth is that the vast majority of misinformation is spread by individuals, and often unknowingly. According to YouGov, a majority of Americans 45 and older are exposed to false information daily in some form or another, with 37% of people 18 to 29 being just as exposed. Of this information, a majority of it is shared through social media, of which Facebook is unsurprisingly the biggest culprit, with TikTok and X not far behind. Now, sometimes this false information is mostly harmless things, like saying shaving makes your beard grow faster or an inaccurate quote from a celebrity. But a large swath of misinformation online is related to radical political ideology, especially that of the far right. Most of America got to see this earlier this year when, during a debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, Trump said this, unprompted.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
As insane as this sounds, it didn't come out of nowhere. The original claims are believed to have happened when a Springfield, Ohio resident couldn't find her cat and, under the assumption that her Haitian immigrant neighbors stole and ate it, posted to Facebook to accuse them of such. Well, come to find out, the entire time her cat was just in the basement. She would go on to apologize and retract the claim, but by then the damage had already been done. In the days before the debate, Trump's running mate and current Vice President-elect J.D. Vance shared the conspiracy theory online, and even doubled down on it when it was found to be fake by claiming he'd happily create stories if it got him elected.
The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it
if
wasn't
I have
just a
to
meme, sir.
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast.
A Springfield father would also be caught up in this frenzy after his son was tragically killed in a car accident caused by a Haitian immigrant. Neo-Nazi groups in Ohio grabbed onto this story and used it as a reasoning for the deportation of these immigrants, who came to Springfield legally under a protected relocation program. The father of the boy would speak out against this in a city council meeting, condemning the use of his son's death to further these claims.
Politicians, Bernie Moreno, Chip Roy, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump, they have spoken my son's name and used his death for political gain. This needs to stop now. They can vomit all the hate they want about illegal immigrants, the border crisis, and even untrue claims about fluffy pets being ravaged and eaten by community members. However, they are not allowed, nor have they ever been allowed to mention Aiden Clark from Springfield, Ohio.
This isn't even accounting for the many other instances of misinformation campaigns using real victims to spread a narrative. Laken Riley's death here in Georgia is repeatedly cited in anti-immigrant posts online, and perhaps most famously, the parents of Sandy Hook victims were targets of harassment after conspiracy theorist Alex Jones perpetuated the myth of the shooting being a hoax online. Part of why Facebook and other social media apps are able to spread these sorts of detrimentally harmful lies so easily is the lack of guardrails preventing anyone from just saying whatever they want. Social media's terms of service agreements users agree to before even using the site, but their moderation process varies in quality, and oftentimes is easy to skirt around. This means users can bypass the automated moderation systems on the site and spread false claims rapidly before a real person from the site is even able to take them down, and by that time it's usually too late. Legacy media, or the more traditional mainstream news, has a much harder time spreading these kinds of lies intentionally, due to the concept of journalistic integrity and a higher level of scrutiny about the details and the truth of the stories they cover. There's usually teams of people who verify information before it can be aired, and a vested interest when shareholders are involved in not doing anything too defaming to their reputation. On social media, however, any individual can spread whatever information they please. In a report, it was found that a singular account spread as many as 171 posts containing false information, on Facebook alone. So, why not just turn to the traditional media for all your primary information? Well, year after year, Americans have stopped doing that. In 2023, the news that got the most trust, over 45%, were public broadcast channels and the Weather Channel. Every other major news outlet was found to only have 44% trust or lower, and an increasing number of Americans are getting most of their news directly from social media sites. So, okay, we know what misinformation is, we know what disinformation is, we know why it's happening, we know where it comes from, what it looks like, and what it can do to the world when it's allowed to happen. The question now is, what do we do about it? Is there anything we can do about it? Thankfully, there's something we've had in our tool belt to fight back this entire time. Media literacy. Media literacy, as it is traditionally defined, is the ability to apply critical thinking skills to the media we consume on a regular basis. Think of it like approaching everything you read, watch, or hear online with a healthy dose of skepticism. Now I know, you may have already given up hope after that statement. After all, if you've spent enough time on the internet, you'll know that critical thinking skills aren't exactly the standard. It is, however, much simpler to practice than you might be expecting. The way it works is split between 4 main dimensions: cognitive, emotional, aesthetic, and moral. On the cognitive end, this is our ability to perceive and understand media. This is stuff like knowing what words on a page mean, the location of something based on its geography, and how spooky music is often associated with horror movies. On the emotional side, this is stuff like news stories about murders and when something jump scares you. We can ask what a piece of media is trying to make us feel. For example, this image is often a sticker applied to gas pumps. We can ask how this sticker here wants us to react. We can question its intent based on what it was stuck on, and why it's wanting us to feel that way about that specific thing. On the aesthetic front, we can analyze what a picture or video is attempting to tell us visually. AI images often give themselves away online by messing up the hands of people or creating nonsensical text. Photoshopped images can have warps in the environment around them or differences in lighting that make it feel weird and uncanny. Lastly, we can employ a moral dimension to this analysis. What values are they conveying? What is its central message? Is it in bad faith? Does it align with my values? Is it attempting to change my values? When a villain is defeated in a movie, why is that a good thing? When the news presents certain stories in a certain light and others in a different light, why is that? These are very entry-level forms of practicing media literacy, but they open the door to criticism and further research instead of taking everything at face value. Media literacy is something that, in the internet age especially, isn't really being applied with generosity. A lot of movies, games, politics, sports, and they're all saturated with misinformation or misunderstanding. Even fictional creations fall victim to the exact same toxic patterns as the average political Facebook posts. Take Squid Game, for instance. The show was popularized off of a clearly dark, anti-consumerist message that talked about the rat race of living under capitalism and a large class divide. That message would be pretty apparent when media literacy is exercised even a tiny bit. A lack of it led to its interpretation as something pretty different, and spin-offs and parodies were made glamorizing the game show aspect of the show more than the in-your-face message it is very obviously trying to get across. This is pretty common whenever a filmmaker creates an anti-war piece, too. Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket is almost entirely composed of incredibly abusive and unappealing scenes depicting the brutality of military service and the horrors of Vietnam. Using the 4 dimensions of media literacy, all of them line up with this being the central message, yet the film is lauded as a favorite by pro-war figures and politicians, including the likes of Donald Trump. In an age without media literacy, inaccurate information continues to affect every aspect of our consumption habits and our society. In recent years, companies like Facebook and TikTok have taken stronger stances against misinformation on their platform, like fact-checking features or mass purges of harmful posts. Still, even with increased awareness and scrutiny, it manages to worm its way into our zeitgeist and cause real-world damage we are often unprepared for. In 2024, some of the year's top podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience or Tucker Carlson regularly peddled false and misleading information, with zero fact checks or follow-ups to hold them accountable. And as we all continually plunge into our echo chambers free from outside context, we allow more shows and movies to pass over us without any critical analysis, leading to misrepresentations that often get them co-opted by the very things they intend to criticize. Media literacy is what fights this. It's been shown time and time again that when introduced properly, media literacy has a positive impact on things like racial biases, stereotypes, and even body image issues. The scale currently required to teach media literacy in a way that can dent the spread of misinformation is not available to it as it stands. Media literacy isn't dead, but it's on life support right now. And the best practice we can do in the meantime to make sure it stays alive is by applying it every day to the things we consume. So, if you take nothing else away from this video, let it be this. It is good to be skeptical. It is good to be informed. But where that skepticism and information comes from matters. And using media literacy prevents you from falling victim to entities who want to take your attention and utilize it for a bad cause. With media literacy, they don't even get the chance. Thanks for watching.